Okay, the board just returned from closed session and while in closed session by a vote of 5-0, with all members voting in favor, the board took action to employ Kimberly Guthrie as the Director of Special Education, effective July 1st, 2021. Also, while in closed session, the board took action to accept a hearing officer's discussion of evidence, findings of fact, and recommended decision in its entire to immediately suspend without pay classified employee number XC7040995, effective February 26, 2021, and to dismiss the employee from employment with the district effective today, June 10, 2021. Board members, all board members voted in favor, 5-0. And now we will move to regular meeting. I will call the meeting to order at 7:09. Good evening, Duarte community. I will call the meeting to order at 7:09. Thank you for joining us for our board meeting tonight. Roll call. Mr. Bell, are you present?
Yes, present.
Mrs. Carroll, are you present?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Dr. Finley, are you present?
Present.
And Mrs. Koo, are you present?
Here.
And Reina Diaz. I will ask Mrs. Carroll to please lead us in the flag salute, and then we will have a moment of reflection, followed up by belief, vision, and mission.
All right, can everybody stand? Face somewhere where the flag would be, I guess, and put your right hand to your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Cece, the belief, vision, and mission.
Okay. Our beliefs. We believe we are a community of learners. We believe learning occurs in a culture of caring and respect. We believe all students are motivated to learn when they are engaged in meaningful work that connects to their lives. We believe expectations do influence performances and outcomes. We believe learning increases when there are high expectations for performance and conduct. We believe we have the responsibility to find solutions that enable all students to learn. Our vision, 21st century schools producing 21st century students. Our mission, provide the knowledge, skills, and inspiration for each student for success in college, career, and life.
Thank you, Mrs. Carroll. We now move to adoption of the agenda. I need a motion.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second?
Second, James.
I think it was Mrs. Carroll.
Yeah.
And yeah. There is any discussion? Okay, Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
Yes.
Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And Mrs. Yes. We now move to item 9, recognitions. Dr. Emerson.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we have a special recognition, and we're very excited to recognize some wonderful work that's been done within our school district. And so at this time, I'd like to invite our coordinator of preschool services, Sophia Valdez, who will speak about our special recognition and recipient. Sophia.
Hello,
There she is.
I'm here. Give me 1 second. Good evening, board members, cabinet, and community. My name is Sofia Valdez, coordinator of preschool services. Tonight, it is with pride that I would like to introduce Nuria Martinez. Nuria is a professional muralist and artist who has left a vivid blueprint of her work on the walls of the Child Development Program. I would like to give you a brief description of her background. Nuria is an immigrant from Honduras. She came 60 years ago and she has been working at different settings, just to mention some. She has served as a volunteer teaching art to elders who are spending their last days in a home hospice. She has won the Pasadena, Las Vegas, and Monrovia Chalk Walk contest. She has painted murals at Sierra Madre, Arcadia, San Marino, and Pasadena school districts.
Wow.
Currently, she presents art workshops at Orange Community College, and she teaches art to children and youths at different recreational parks. But this is the story. 2 years ago, Nuria was invited to the Child Development as a volunteer to share her artistic talents with our preschool students. Since then, Nuria has portrayed her skills wherever she sees a blank, empty, and dark wall. She creates interactive and enriching learning environments through colors and movement with visual effects and animation. And not only that, but our preschoolers have had the opportunity to engage in a freehand art expression. In addition, Nuria hand-painted the official preschool logo that enhances the interest of the Child Development Office by offering a welcoming and nurturing climate. Tonight, I want to say thank you to Nuria for the many, many hours of work, dedication, and passion on the work that she has done in our Child Development Program. Thank you, Nuria, for bringing a colorful learning setting, especially during this challenging time. When she knew that we were ready to reopen our full-day program at Beardsley, right away, she jumped in and she says, let's paint the walls, and she did. Thank you, Nuria, for bringing eye-catching murals that capture the attention of our visitors who cannot resist posing for a photo. So if you haven't been there, I invite you to pause and take a photo, in Nuria's murals. So also, I would like to share with you a video so where you can see her in action along with our preschoolers. Go ahead, Marcelo. And Nuria is here. She's painting, by the way.
Wow.
And this is just a short video, okay? But it has been many, many, many hours of work. Thank you so much, Nuria. Nuria is here if you, I don't know.
I'd like to thank Nuria and Sophia's vision to bring her into our district, and hopefully not just to the preschool program, but hopefully any other schools soon can she start, living her art in there too. And I had the pleasure to meet Nuria, and is an excellent woman. And I really thanks her for made this art into a interaction from our little kids to with the paint with the art that is there. So thank you very much for this presentation, and we really appreciate that art. Board members, if you have any other comment, or Dr. Emerson.
I have something. I just wanted to say I met Nuria too at the preschool, actually, when she was, I think it was a career day sort of open house. And she was helping the kids paint also, but I also saw what she did at Beardsley, and she is extremely talented.
Yes, she is.
Extremely talented, and just, I don't know what you want to call whims. I don't know. She's so creative and so kid friendly and interactive. So she's amazing. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'll second that. I mean, I loved when the preschool was opening down at Beardsley, and I'm just thinking about students and staff returning to campus, in kind of as the pandemic is still going on, to be able to see kind of a friendly mural like that. I think that just sets the right tone for everybody as they're entering the work or school place there. So really tremendous work, and thank you so much for sharing your talents with the whole Duarte community. Really special.
Thank you.
And I would like to say the same thing. First, I'm gonna start off with you, Sophia. Thank you very much for the foresight that you had to even have this to be presented there, because that wall just came alive after we saw the paintings that she did. And again, Ms. Martinez, may I tell you that what it is so pleasing to me to see someone that have the talent that you have, and you had an opportunity to share your talent with us. Thank you. It's absolutely fabulous. And we feel very honored that you're one of the persons who have blessed us to be able to do what you have done for us. So thank you so much, dear.
Thank you.
And I'll close it out with just saying, we all obviously recognize your talent, but I think it's amazing that you're sharing your imagination with us, and you're inviting us and the students in our district to play and kind of play in your world that you created for them. So thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for making me part of this, especially Sophia. Thank you so much with all my heart, and to be part of all these project that you're doing with the kids, and just being part of their life, and leaving a legacy of colors in their minds, so they will remember not only me or them painting a mural at 5 years old, but they will remember this whole stuff, like working so hard for all of them.
Yes, outstanding.
And we
You're on mute, Madam President.
I was asking Nuria if she is a Duarte resident. Did she lives in Duarte?
I live in the city. I live in Temple City.
Oh, Temple City. Okay. Thank
You just got adopted.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. It is a pleasure, and we hope to see the new pieces of art soon. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you so
We
much.
continue with our board meeting, and now we move to presentations, and item 10.1, presentation of the budget. Dr. Emerson.
Thank you, Madam President. At this time, we will ask Mr. Jim Bowler, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, to come on and present the initial presentation of the 2020-2021 budget adoption or adopted budget proposal, excuse me, for the Duarte Unified School District. Mr. Bowler, over to you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Amerson. Good evening to the school board and good evening to anyone in the audience watching tonight's board meeting. Well, here we are a week and a half into June, and we're presenting the adopted budget tonight as an information item. Remember that budget adoption is a two-step process, as is the LCAP plan, which will follow as a presentation after this. It's a two-step process. We have public hearings tonight after the presentation is provided. And then in 2 weeks, on June 24th, the budget will be presented for board action. And so we'll start with the cover of the budget packet, very similar to prior years, and we'll flip the pages as we call it out. So let's move to the next page and the budget calendar, which is where we always start. The budget calendar gives us a context for how this particular report, how it fits into the year ahead. And so we have adopted budget in June. In July and August, if there are any changes in the state budget that's approved, that's different than the May revise, then the school districts up and down the state do what's called a 45-day budget revision, and they note the changes between May revise and the adopted state budget, and they portray that as an information item for the public. In September, we come back with the data for closing the books on this fiscal year that we're in right now. And so we'll work over the months of June and July and August, and then we'll close the books and present the findings in September. December and March mark the first interim report and the second interim report, and both of those are updates to the budget that you're going to hear about tonight. Those are the three major, tonight and those two interims are the three major budget reports for public schools. And then in January and May, we're already talking about the 22-23 school year. When we get to January, we hear the governor's budget proposal. And then again, the May revise for the 22-23 school year. So the budget calendar covers quite a span of time. It crosses over and refers to budget information over a 3-year period. So as we go to the next page, we'll talk about the focus areas for tonight. We're going to talk about first the 2021 estimated actuals. And so that's this year's budget that we're in. And we're going to talk about how we're estimating this budget year to play out. The estimated actuals are in your budget book in the first 3 columns. And next to those first 3 columns, columns 4, 5, and 6 are the numbers for the adopted budget for next year. So you have 2 budget years side by side. We will then talk about the governor's May revise and some of the major assumptions that are in that report. We're going to update you on one-time money. We've talked a lot about one-time money this year. We've received it from the federal government, and there are state one-time grant dollars available. We will apprise you of where we are with that today. And then how those dollars fit into the adopted budget for 21-22. We'll look at the multi-year budget projections. Remember that Assembly Bill 1200 requires not only the adopted budget be presented, but the 2 years that follow. And so the multi-year budget projections for 22-23 and 23-24 are included. We'll talk about budget stabilization. And you'll hear some common themes. Budget stabilization has been a topic in Duarte now for about 3 years. And so we're going to revisit the needs for those budget projections in the 2 out years. We'll give you an update on the other funds besides the general fund and Fund 17, the reserve. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about cash flow. So that will cover a full slate of budgetary type activities that are currently going on in the district. On the next page, we'll delve into the estimated actuals. And so the numbers will show up after some description here of the estimated actual report. And so remember, it is an estimate. The estimated actuals that you'll hear about tonight will become the unaudited actuals in the September board report. We all know that this was a year in which our schools were closed. The physical facilities were closed over 80% of the school year. That had an impact, of course, on academic delivery, but it had an impact on budget as well, and we'll talk about that. This was a year where all employee salaries continued to be paid. We didn't contribute to the unemployment data that we heard so much about over this past year, and that's a good thing. Our employees continued to work and continued to be paid during this pandemic. We did, however, reduce some areas in expenses with school closure, and we estimate about $2 million in expenditure reductions, and some of the categories are listed here. We didn't have a need for substitute employees that we typically budget for, extra duty assignments. School transportation is a budget that's about $750,000. That was reduced down to a fraction of what we paid for the year. And then, of course, utility costs with the lights not on, and gas and water costs came down this past year. And so those are some examples of several that allowed us to spend less than we typically do in a typical school year when students are in session. And then there's the COVID relief one-time funds. That, of course, has been a large contribution to all school districts up and down the state for getting through these difficult times. And we'll talk about that as well. We have a chart especially for that to show the board and the public what dollars have been received. And we'll talk a little bit about how those dollars are being spent. So as we move forward, we'll take a look at the numbers on the next page. This is really a numbers at a glance, which you'll also receive for next year's budget. So let's go down the summary here. So we're estimating wrapping up this 2021 school year with receipt of $51.9 million in revenues. Our expenses are almost $2 million less than that at $49.9 million. And you can see the difference there at just under $2 million. We have a very small transfer in from Fund 25 that represents the developer fees that have been collected this past year. Yes, developer fees for the new development in residential housing in Duarte, and 22,000 represents 3% of those dollars collected that were considered administrative funds. We had a beginning balance. So to take you back down to a year ago, or actually when we closed the books last September, the general fund had a beginning balance of a negative $81,000. But remember, Fund 17, we always refer to Fund 17 as an extension of the general fund. That maintained 1.4 million. And so we had a positive ending fund balance in Fund 17 that covered the deficit here in the general fund. So when you consider all of the activity over the course of the year, revenues in, expenses out, a $2 million difference, we're projecting an ending fund balance of $1,938,000. On the next page, we detail what those dollars represent. There's that projected ending balance again, $1,938,000. And the components of those dollars are revolving cash in stores. Those are inventory and a revolving cash checkbook that we maintain in the district office. That's $20,858. That's always a constant. Well, I will say stores fluctuates, but revolving cash is always a constant. We have some restricted dollars that are going to fold into the ending fund balance to be spent next year. And then we have unrestricted dollars, the lion's share at 1.4 million. And those are the three ending fund balances that are derived from the total projected ending fund balance. The most significant, I'll say, every dollar is important, but the most significant of those three are the unrestricted dollars, always. Unrestricted dollars are king in the general fund. They can be used for anything. In this case, the 1.4 million, coupled with the 1.5 million in Fund 17. We're thinking that we're going to finish the year between those two account lines with about $3 million in unrestricted monies between both of those funds. So that's what we're thinking in terms of this year closing on June 30. We'll pay the bills, we'll collect the receivables over July and August, and then again, we'll come back with the unaudited actuals report in September. So let's shift the gear and let's talk about next year then.
Mr. Ballard?
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make sure sometimes I'm hearing your audio kind of cut in and out. So just project for me a little bit, just so I want to make sure that your voice isn't cutting out.
I will. Okay, I might have a paper that has covered the speaker. I'll definitely check that. So
sorry to mess with your flow. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. You didn't mess at all with the flow here. We will now transition to next year's budget, and I'll ask Marcelo to flip the slide, and we're going to start with the governor's May revised budget. That always starts the conversation on the following year. And we'll talk about Proposition 98, because Proposition 98 is really the bedrock of education funding in California. The California electorate voted for Prop 98 back in 1988. Seasoned CBOs, some lived through that and remember that personally. We're reporting it out because this is an interesting chart. You can see the funding from Prop 98 that we receive, and ultimately these dollars are represented in the LCFF funds that we'll talk about in a little bit. Prop 98 passed in 1988 at a time when the intention behind it was to provide a guarantee, a funding guarantee for school districts. And so there are formulas that Prop 98 have that take the state of the economy into account, and then ultimately there's a calculation that provides funding for school districts. What's interesting about this chart, when you start and you see the 2008-9 school year, we were in the midst of the Great Recession back then. And for 4 years, education funding struggled. You can see right, all of those numbers are right around $50 million. The state was writing IOUs at that time to public school districts because of its inability to fund a district at the level required by law. So Prop 98 is not bulletproof. It works when the economy is going well, but when the economy is not, it struggles along and reflects the state of the economy. In the years that followed, so if you look at 2014-15, you see that the budget went from 59 million to 67 million. That's when state or school district funding changed from what was called the old revenue limit formula to the LCFF formula. And Jerry Brown ushered in the LCFF formula. It was an 8-year plan, and you can see in a growing economy, the dollars just incrementally grew. Lastly, what you might find interesting in the last 2 years, the fear of a year ago and the budget, the California budget tanking because of the COVID-19 impacts, actually that turned out to not be the case, and the economy is very strong and has been for some time. And so the budget, the state budget is 227 billion, and you can see there the guarantee from Prop 98 in the 21-22 is $93.7 billion. As we move to the next slide, one of the first things school districts take away from the May revise is, what is the cost of living adjustment going to be? Or, is there going to be one? In 2021, in the current year we're in, by statutory law, we were entitled to a COLA of 2.31%. However, because of the pandemic and the fears that that the state's economy wouldn't be able to support it, we didn't receive anything. School districts received a 0 COLA in 2021. But as we move forward into the 21-22 year, while the statutory COLA, statutory means by law, it's a formula used at the Department of Finance, they're combining the 2 COLA years. So 2.31 plus 1.7 gives us more than a 4% COLA for next year. And then Governor Newsom added an additional percent to bring school district the cost of living adjustment to 5.07. That's what's in this budget tonight that you'll be reviewing, a COLA of 5%. And then in the 2 out years, 2.48 and 3.11, those two are budgeted in those 2 out years as well. So money is growing, cost of living is being provided. On the next slide, it was noted in the May revise that's, let's see, that the LCFF funding formula next year looks like this. We have a base grant on the first line for 2021. That's the current year. The base grant are funds, are dollars that every school district up and down the state receives per student. Then the next line shows that 5.07, they're calling it the Mega COLA. 5.07 translates into $390 more for all of our K-3 students, $396 for grades 4 through 6, $408 for grades 708, and then in 9-12, $473 per student is the result of a 5.07% COLA. So when you add those two together, the base grant from the previous year plus COLA, we have a new established base grant that goes across in K-3 starting with $8,092. And then when you get to grades 9 through 12, $9,802 there. Below that, in K-3, we have what's called a grade span adjustment. And that's a recognition that class size reduction does have additional costs, and there's an $842 supplement to the base grant for students in grades K-3. And then in grades 9-12, there is a supplement as well, recognizing that high schools are more costly to educate our students. And CTE is Career Tech Ed is a component of the high school. And so an additional $255 is provided there as the grade span adjustment. So the adjusted base grant, as you look at it, when all things are added up for next year, we're projected to receive $8,934 per student in K3 grades K through 3. And as you go across the line there, it concludes with grades 9-12 receiving $10,057 per student. That's the base grant. Now, in addition to the base grant, there are the supplemental and concentration grant funds. Just a reminder that every district in California has a different profile and receives differing amounts from very little to quite a bit on the spectrum of additional funds. The supplemental grant represents dollars that school districts receive in recognition of their unduplicated pupil percentage. That's what the UPP represents. And what that means is we're talking about school districts and their student population that includes EL students, English learners, students that qualify for free and reduced price meals, and foster youth. And so school districts receive additional dollars for the percent of that student population. And if that population exceeds 55%, school districts receive additional dollars in the concentration grant. And so we refer to the supplemental and concentration grant as the LCAP. The school district comes up with a plan for additional learning opportunities for those student populations, and the district receives additional dollars for a more improved academic delivery. And so you may recall Matt Phillips the other night when he gave his presentation from School Services. He commented on our supplemental and concentration grant funds. It was interesting to hear his perspective because our unduplicated pupil percentage is about 68%. But there are districts in LA County, like Baldwin Park, and a few others that are in the range of 90%. They would receive more dollars than Duarte Unified because they have a higher percent. And then a small district like Castaic would receive very little supplemental and concentration grant funding because because of the makeup of their student population. So this is all about the local control funding formula, base grant plus supplemental and concentration grant.
Could you when you said the makeup, I didn't want to disturb you, but when you said, give me just a quick example of the makeup of the student population.
Okay, well, when you think of funding in total for students, we often characterize when asked, for brevity, we've said that we receive about $12,000 per student on average. Well, that takes into account each of these four funding levels. And so, Mr. Bell, we receive the base grant for all of our students, and then by formula, we receive supplemental and concentration grant funding. So there are three layers of dollars that are received. And so all in all, we're somewhere in the range of $12,500 per student when you consider all of the dollars we receive. And so that's LCFF funding. Now you'll hear more because we single out the supplemental and concentration grant funds, and we're required to have a plan, that's the local control accountability plan, for uses of those dollars, and we do that on an annual basis. So you're going to hear more about that in the next presentation that Dr. Hillman will give. So this is LCFF funding on one chart. It includes all three sums of money, when you take our student population and factor in these dollars, in tonight's budget, you're going to see LCFF at about a $34 million total revenue amount as all of these dollars are summed up And it's all based off of the makeup of our student population. Okay.
Jim, can I ask another quick question here?
Absolutely.
On this line, the GSA, can you remind me again what GSA stands for, and then also why it doesn't apply in grades 4 through 6 and 7 through 8?
Absolutely. GSA is an acronym for Grade Span Adjustment. And the reason that you see it in grades K through 3, years ago in the 90s, when class size reduction became a very popular program, reducing class sizes, reducing class sizes is more costly than 2 classes of 20 students is more costly than 1 class of, say, 38 or even 40. 40 would be a high number, but it gives you an idea because you're almost doubling your personnel expenses. You have 2 teachers in class size reduction in grades K through 3. And so the $842 represents dollars that are intended to be used to offset some of the additional costs associated with class size reduction. You don't see it in 4 through 6 or 7 and 8 because they have they don't have class size reduction in those grade levels. It's a K3 form of funding to acknowledge additional expenses. And then in grades 9 through 12, on the natural, it's more expensive to educate high school students because of electives, the various single subject subjects that are taught in the single subject teachers. $255 is added on. It's an add-on really of revenues, acknowledging that it's more costly to educate high school students. And so that's what those are. They're called the grade span adjustment, and only for those particular grade levels, but it's in recognition of those reasons stated.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, before we move on to the next slide, any other questions about this particular one? Okay, Marcelo, we'll move on to the next slide then. And we'll talk a little bit. Remember, we're talking about the May revise now, and that's what's provided in the governor's May revise, a 5% cost of living adjustment impacting each of those grade level dollars for students. Now, special education also receives a cost of living adjustment of 4.05 as portrayed in the governor's May revise. It's a modest amount of money. It will increase special ed funding from a base rate of $625 to $650. What we're talking about here are dollars that are received by the SELPA and distributed to the member districts. AB 602 dollars are specifically what this is in reference to, and those are dollars that are allocated for special education funding. This slide simply states special education is included in the COLA for next year. However, it's not given the additional 1% that Governor Newsom provided to LCFF. So moving forward to the next slide. Other planning factors to take into considerations. These are the big ones. We've talked about these for a number of years now. Increases in our CalSTRS pension plans. This is the employer paid portion of the plans. You can see with CalSTRS in 2021, 16.15% of a teacher's payroll is provided by the employer to CalSTRS as part of their STRS pension plan. As you look out over the years that follow, these are projections of increases to 16.92 next year, and then it moves to 19.1. CalPERS, separate from CalSTRS, has their own funding formulas. They're at 20.7 this year. Next year, they move to 22.91. And then as you go across, you can see in the year 24, 25, they're projected at 27.1. Now, actuaries make these projections for CalSTRS. CalSTRS and CalPERS are all about their investments and maintaining the high level and high quality of their investments. And so these are still the byproduct of the recession from a number of years ago. And this is CalSTRS and CalPERS playing catch up really on the losses that they experienced in their portfolios during the recession. And then there's unemployment insurance. We don't talk very often about unemployment insurance because it's typically been pretty stable at 0.05% over the years. That's a calculation on payroll. But because of the pandemic, this is a direct byproduct of the pandemic. Unemployment went through the roof, and so the unemployment rates for public schools are going up from 0.05% to 1.23%, and then they're projected to be 0.2% going forward. And those are calculations on payroll. And so they're yet another increase in expenses for the district. And so we'll talk a little bit more about these. Certainly when the state budget is passed, we'll see if these numbers stick. In prior years, there has been some relief on our pension plans as a byproduct of the governor's decision to provide some funding to offset these increases. I can tell you that in the years that have just recently, a few years back, when we received a 2% increase in CalSTRS and CalPERS, you say, well, how much does that translate into? On the high years, we've paid $600,000 in addition to what our regular pay is. In other words, the increase was $600,000 in STRS and PERS as a result of a 2% increase in the employer paid portion of the payroll. So we'll keep our eye on this, but we have budgeted these numbers. They're in the budget, and we're prepared to pay those out over the next these numbers over the next 3 years.
Jim,
yes.
Jim, quick question about these numbers, and forgive my budgetary ignorance here, but just so I understand this correctly. So the state of California pays or allocates money to us as a district through LCFF, and then we then contribute back into CalSTRS and CalPERS. I mean, why don't they just keep the money and put it into the funds themselves? Does that make sense? Like, why give it to us and then we just give it back?
Well, that's the reason is it's not a liability for the state. These are CalSTRS and CalPERS. Remember, fire and police have CalPERS. Government agencies have STRS and PERS as their pension plans. It's the responsibility of the local agency, that is the school district or the city or fire or police, to pay these employer costs. The employees pay in as well, but they pay about more. They pay less than half of what the employer pays, and so when you combine the two, those are the dollars used for pensions down the road, and it's school district's responsibility at the local
okay
level. Yeah, the state simply won't take this on as a liability.
Gotcha. And so when you say that our employees are paying part of the contribution to CalSTRS and CalPERS, so for example, for CalSTRS, when it says 19.1%, so are we paying, I mean, roughly 10%, and then the employees are paying roughly 10%, or is the district responsible for 19, and then the employees are also paying an additional 19?
The district is responsible for the 19% as the employer responsibility. The employee is paying somewhere in the range of about 8% as an
Okay,
employee contribution to STRS.
I see.
A
Okay,
mandatory, yes, it's a mandatory contribution, but no, it's both employee and employer funded.
gotcha. Okay.
Madam President.
All right, thank you.
Jim, just remind me, wasn't there pension reform coming out of the Great Recession? Didn't the state actually shift this burden onto school districts at a higher degree post recession? Because these rates were not always this way. There used to be more of a lion's share that was paid for by the state, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
You know, well, there has always been an employer portion paid to STRS and PERS.
But the burden of the employer increased post recession.
Yes, it did. And again, the reason, you know, actuarial studies are performed for both CalSTRS and CalPERS, and those are projections on how well their investments are doing. You know, they both of entities were hurt during the recession in terms of their portfolio of investments, and so this is an attempt to recoup some of those lost dollars over a number of years. And so this one has been painful for school districts. And school districts have been very vocal about this since you know 5-6 years ago when these increases began. But you're right, Dr. Emerson. This is the employer portion has gone up incrementally over the years, and that simply means another portion. More of our budget is the dollar. More of our budget dollars have to be committed to these categories. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. I'll tell you one more that's not listed on here would be minimum wage. And while minimum wage doesn't have, you know, nearly the impacts that these categories do, when you consider, you know, $1 a year, the lowest paid positions for all school districts have to be measured against and adjusted against minimum wage. And so, you know, you have increases in expenses coming from many directions, and these are all employee driven expenses that continue to go up. And so we'll, you know, we continue on this path of increased costs to do business. It's really as simple as that. When you consider the cost of living adjustment, I'll just add one more thing. You know, when we've said this before, when a 5% increase on LCFF is provided, you know, it's great to have additional revenues, but those revenues get offset by declining enrollment and the loss of dollars there, plus these increases that are significant for the employer paid pension plans. So that's just the reality of public, you know, funding and public education budgeting. So we'll stay on the path. We'll stay with it, and we'll see if you know, there's no relief in the May revise. We'll see if anything changes in the budget as it's adopted and agreed upon between the legislature and the governor as the final result. And we'll know that just in a couple of weeks. So if there are no other questions, we'll move on to the next slide, and so the May revise. So that lays out more money, a 5% reserve. Yes, we have additional costs in the pension plans. Unemployment is in a temporary increasing mode due to the pandemic, but those are components of the budget itself. So when we talk about next year's budget now, let's put it in terms specific to our district. LCFF, our LCFF funds, those that we talked about earlier on the grid for each of the 4 grade levels, we're budgeting 3275 average daily attendance for the second year in a row. Now, this is unusual and another result of the pandemic. You know, we've said it for so many years now that the rule that declining enrollment districts follow, where revenues are concerned, is if you're in declining enrollment, you're going to be paid on the prior year. The state gives you 1 year of grace, so to speak, for a school district to plan for that loss in ADA. And so with enrollment largely disrupted this year up and down the state in public schools, the state decided that the rule of paying on prior year should continue for a second year, 2 years in a row. And so next year we're funded on 3275, which is where our average daily attendance was in the 1920 school year. And then on top of that, of course, there's the 5% COLA. Where federal funds are concerned, Title I and II, you know, and III, for example, will continue as usual, plus the one-time ESSER funds. The ESSER funds will show on another slide separately when we get to the one-time monies. State income includes lottery dollars. It includes various smaller categoricals. And we're also including in this report the two one-time grant amounts. We've talked a little bit about these, the in-person grant and then the extended learning grant as well. And the board will be acting on a plan for the extended learning opportunities grant tonight. And then lastly, the fourth component of revenues is local income. That changes very little from year to year. And it includes special education funding through the local SELPA. It includes, you know, facility use dollars. It includes the interest we earn on our revenues and so forth. So those are the four categories of revenues. And when we move to the next slide, we can take a look at how those four categories fit. We'll get to the four categories. This is the one-time fund summary. So in federal and state funding, we've already received these are all acronyms, CARES and ESSER funds. And we've received almost $4.3 million. Then there was a second round of ESSER funds that we received, and all school districts up and down the state received, to the tune of $2,958,000. Then when we shift to the state grants, our in-person instruction grants, we are receiving $948,000, and then the expanded learning grant, we're receiving $2.4 million. So when you sum up all of those four categories of new one-time monies, we have $10.6 million available. And we've spent the lion's share of these dollars over this past year. And as we project into next year, these are dollars that have just about been fully committed going forward. Now, there's one more amount of money, ESSER 3. So when you think ESSER 1 and 2 were plentiful, ESSER 3 comes in on the next slide. And there we go, ESSER 3. So we're receiving yet another round of one-time money, ESSER 3 funds, $6.6 million. Stated that the current authority by the legislature is to, these are strictly Doherty dollars. We have current authority to receive $4.9 million. There will be a future authority into the not too distant future in the year coming of 1.7 million. So total of 6.6 million. Now, ESSER 3 funds are not in this budget. And the reason they're not in this budget is because of the timing of the notice of the funds And the state had not yet given an account string, a number of numbers, an account, like a bank account, a number, but districts did not receive ESSER 3, the account string, even though we were notified this money was coming. So we will budget this money at first interim in December. These are funds that have a 3-year window period for spending. So those dollars will be spread out ultimately over a 3-year period. There is a plan that will be attached. The board will hear more about those dollars and what they're ultimately committed to be spent on, and we'll move on. So, you take ESSER 3 funds and then the dollars on the previous page, and that puts us just over 17 million in one-time funding. These dollars have helped us, and we've talked a little bit about this in a prior report, helped us with our food services program. About $1 million in total has been provided to maintain the food service program through this pandemic. The dollars have helped us with personal protective equipment, everything from masks to gowns to face masks to all of the protective type equipment, plexiglass throughout the classrooms and offices. And then in addition to that, large sums of that one-time money have been utilized towards salaries and benefits of our existing staff members who have worked through this pandemic, and that's an acceptable use for those dollars. And so that has helped us to get through, at least so far, the pandemic. So one-time dollars, 17 million, that's a lot of money, but we certainly needed it, we're using it, and about all except for the ESSER 3 funds are already committed and or spent moving forward. I was including the ESSER. If you're wondering what does ESSER mean, ESSER is an acronym for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. That's what the acronym represents. So if there are no questions about it, you'll hear more about the spending of these funds well into the next school year. And ultimately we'll have a summary report of expenses utilizing all of the funds. We don't know if 17 million, if the buck stops there or if there will be future allocations or not. So as we move forward so that concludes revenues for the year. It's the combination of LCFF through local revenues, and then the one-time dollars are in addition to that. And so let's talk about expenses. We budgeted next year as assuming school will be in session all year. And so our certificated and classified salaries are updated for step and column on their respective salary schedules. There are those employee benefit rates. The employer portions have been updated for STRS, PERS, and state unemployment. We have instructional materials adjusted, say for essentials only, but we have school site budgets in place. We have some dollars allocated towards text purchases. And then our operational expenses assume students are in classrooms. And so we've reinstated the prior year budget for the utilities, for electricity costs, for transportation. We've rebudgeted dollars for substitute employees, teacher substitutes, extra duty pay. And so all of those categories are back to normal, so to speak. Normal is where we were 2 years ago with the budget, the operating budget in the general fund. And so 21-22 assumes all expenses to be very similar, and including the use of those one-time monies for areas needed in the budget. On the next page, We'll look at the numbers at a glance. So these are the numbers that sum up. They're the numbers in your budget book, but these are the totals. So for next year, we're projecting revenues at 50.3 million, expenses at 49.5. There's a positive difference of $795,000 between revenues and expenses. There's that beginning balance. Remember, that's our projected ending balance for this year. That becomes our beginning balance for next year. And then when you combine the difference, the 795,000 with the beginning balance, we have a projected ending balance of $2.7 million. Components of that ending balance are on the next page, and we'll talk about that. There are the components. There's the revolving cash and stores amount, $20,858. Restricted dollars are much higher here because they take into account the one-time dollars we were referring to. The ESSER dollars are restricted dollars, and they show up in the restricted column on the budget. And so with the large sums of money that we've received, we anticipate carrying those dollars over into several years. And that's exactly what that 2.254 represents. The unrestricted dollars are at 4.58%. And when you couple that with Fund 17, right now we're projecting a 4% reserve for next year in the 21-22 budget. So that concludes the 21-22 budget condition. Now we talk about the multi-year projections. We have a little different story here, but not much different than we've had in the last couple of years, where we had similar assumptions in prior years as well. So again, the assumptions in the multi-year projections assume all students return to school. We project a decline of 100 students per year. Now I want to clarify something because the other night, Matt Phillips from School Services made a comment about the third year out. And he said, it looks like there are additional students budgeted for. Whether those students actually materialize is something to be watchful of. Well, you know, when Matt was working off of the first interim report that was put together last November. And when that report was put together, we budgeted for the first 2 years the same ADA as in 1920, and it remained the same in the third year. And when it did, and it went through, we recognized that we needed to change that in second interim. And so when second interim followed, we had reduced the 2 out years by 100 students per year. And so Matt didn't catch that in his report, only because it wasn't available for him to know, and he and I chatted about that afterwards. But we have realigned the budget to reflect declining enrollment over the next few years. So you say, okay, 200 students lost over the next 2 years. What if it's 150? Well, if it's 150, then we gain 50, and and 50 students times LCFF. Let's say it's $12,000 per student. You know, that's real money. That's over $500,000 that we'll add back into the budget. But we won't know that until we get to these out years, what our actual enrollment is. We prepared for a loss of 100 students, which is a reasonable assumption, a reasonable thing to do with this budget. We don't have any one-time money budgeted beyond the ESSER 3 funds. And then we do have a budget stabilization plan for those 2 years because there are deficits in both of those school years. Again, because of the projected decline in students and because of increased costs with the things we talked about earlier. So let's go to the next page and let's look at the multi-year projections. So this aligns all 3 years and the budgets that we are now projecting for those 2 out years. The adopted budget column are the numbers we just talked about for next year. We said that with the general fund reserve at 458,000 at the bottom, coupled with Fund 17, that's a 4% reserve. But when you carry over to the 22-23 year and 23-24, the one-time money goes away. We talked about that money as masking the ongoing deficit that we have with this budget. And that ongoing deficit becomes real apparent. It comes right back to us in 22-23 when we realize that total revenues are 43.8 million in 22-23 and 44 million the year after. Well, why they're 50 million next year are because of the one-time dollars that we're receiving. And then those go away. Expenses remain about the same. And so to bring about a positive result in the general fund, we've added a credit, so to speak, 4,750,000. We've added a credit to expenses. That's just a placeholder that will adjust ultimately with the reality that takes place. But if we're able to reach 4,750,000, and that can be through a combination of ways, that could be additional revenues that are not planned for here, or a reduction of expenses. It's a large number, or a combination of both higher revenues and reductions in expenses. The goal, we'll call this a goal, 4,750,000. As you go down the middle column, you'll see that if it's 4.75 million, that will result in a 6.74% reserve. So the goal is for greater reductions, or a greater the credit could be reduced down to $3 million, but then we would be right at the 3% mark, and that's not where we want to be. The expectation of the county office is that we'll have 3% in the general fund and 3% in Fund 17 for a total of 6%. That's the expectation. So we've set our goal to reach that expectation, but you have to have tangible reductions in expenses or tangible receipts for new income to reach that goal. And if the 22-23 adjustment, if that can be accomplished, on the natural, the 23-24 adjustment is corrected because of the ongoing nature of reduced expenses. If we get a reduction in 22-23, well, that carries forward into the 23-24 school year. So the focus of this district, the focus of Dougherty Unified going into the next year should be to center on that 4.75 as a goal, as a target to reach. If we fall shorter than that, the 6%, 6.7% reserve will fluctuate depending on the success of the budget stabilization plan. Did I explain that okay? For clarification's sake, are there any questions about it?
I do have a question, Jim. Thank you very much for going over this chart here and for kind of pulling together the 10,000 foot view here. So just so I understand, and so I guess anyone watching understands, these two adjustments to the expenses for the 2 out years, which has this 4.75 million and the 4 million, if we make that total adjustment in the 22-23 year, and it is an ongoing savings, we don't have to do an additional 4 million in 23-24, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right. And then in terms of our reserve, so you said that the county has an expectation that we have at least 3% in Fund 17 plus an additional 3% in the general fund for a total of around 6%. At some point we will reach the board will decide on what magical percentage number we want to have in Fund 17. And then at that point, do we no longer have to contribute to it? And so that that money can then be reallocated back to the general fund for expenses that are kind of on our wish list. Is that right?
Well, there's a bit of a yes and no answer to that. If the
Okay.
reserve, so as an example, if we had a 10% reserve, you could lean on that 10% reserve and you could take 2% as an example from it for expenses that we might identify. They would be one-time expenses, because remember, the reserve is one-time money. Once you use it up, it's gone. It's like your savings account. Those are dollars that don't get replenished. Fund 17 has $1.5 million because at one time the district moved $1.5 million out of the general fund and into Fund 17. And so the state requires that 3% minimum, and we've watched this roller coaster for the past couple of years of being right on that 3% mark. I'll refer to Matt one more time. This is the third time I'm referring to Matt Phillips, but he said that's not a place you want to you can't be comfortable with, because you can drop below 3%, and then you're required to repair the budget, and it's not easy to do. It becomes not easy to do. So the higher your reserve, when you consider those dollars as like a rainy day fund, but you want those dollars to remain fairly stable and consistent at a higher balance than we've been able to achieve over the past few years. If we get to 6%, that's right where we want to be and where we would really want to stay. It's not really considered, it shouldn't be considered as discretionary for spending because we're above the 3% mark. You want more money in the bank to offset, who would have thought a worldwide pandemic would bring the destruction that it has, or, there can be a number of things, the recession, the Great Recession back in the day when, in those years, districts struggled. They used their reserves to get through those difficult years when the state was handing out IOUs. So you want your savings account, you want your reserve to be as high as you can get it, reasonably speaking. And it's a challenge to do it. Once you spend it, you either have to rebuild it back if that's your goal, or you have to live with a lower reserve and then deal with the ramifications of being at 2, 3, maybe, right at the state's minimum level.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess what we saw, sorry, Ken.
It's okay.
What we saw from the presentation on Monday is that right now, hovering at that 3%, at least in comparison to similar districts in the surrounding area, we are we're on a tightrope compared to other districts who were probably, in their reserves had something closer to 13, 14, I think up to 17%. So I think it's good for us to move in a direction where that reserve is higher, so we're not fretting and having to do unpleasant things all around. Every time there's a bump in the road, we can weather those storms a little bit better if we have more of a cushion.
Absolutely. That's right. That's
okay.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Jim, yes. And I should have answered prior to you moving the slide down. There was a figure there where we had 100. I believe we looked at where the declining enrollment was at 100, where we kind of, right. And most of all of these other figures, we can't do much about them. And I don't, those are costs and expenses. But I'd like to know, as a board member, like if we had 100 declining students from declining enrollment, it sure would help me to understand a little better why those kids are not here. I mean, is it something that they made a decision because of we went to distant learning or whatever, or it would help me because those are actual dollars when the kids aren't here. Is there a way to find out? I'm not talking about run out and do a report tomorrow, but is there a way to find out what are some of the reasons why those 100 students aren't in Duarte Unified anymore? it would, I'd like to see just, whenever you could, get the figures, because to me, that could be a sizable amount of money, 100. And I mean, at least I'll know, or we would know as a board, why 100 students left our school district. It would be, I would like to know.
Absolutely. And we can provide a more comprehensive report on that.
I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
One other footnote on this, I'll say, is that where you see total revenues, remember that the COLAs are factored in that are identified in the May revise. So we have cost of living adjustments in those out years. But then when you factor in declining enrollment, they negate the impact of a COLA. So if you lose 100 students, that's over $1 million in revenues lost. A 3% COLA brings in about $1 million. And so they offset each other. Just when you think, well, a COLA, great, we're going to have more money, that gets offset by declining enrollment. So, it's something we've been dealing with for some time now, but nonetheless, that's where we are currently. So this is our goal. This is our sort of our mission for the going forward. We've been here before. We were here, in the 18-19 school year, similar situation, needed reductions in the 2 out years. We got through those years, but it's a function of that structural deficit that's ongoing that we have to tackle. So if there are no other questions about this particular slide, this is the MYP. And I will say that the budget stabilization plan that will come before the board that the county office has asked for reflects these 2 numbers in those 2 out years. And in that report, we'll talk a little more about it. We're just, because it's after it's 2 years out. Right now, at this point in time, we're just generalizing the types of things that we can look more in depth at to help us with reducing that structural deficit. Okay, let's move on to the next slide then. With all that said, so to portray it as a line graph. There are 2 charts. This first one reflects the reserve without budget stabilization plan. It's to say, if the district did nothing, and we know that won't be the case, but we portray it with where those numbers are projected. This is a line graph, and so the orange horizontal line says state required minimum. Well, that's the 3% reserve that the state requires. So next year, we're projecting to be at 4, but those deficit amounts, the negative 4.75 million, if that doesn't get tackled at all, will drop down to a negative 3% reserve, and then in the year that follows, a negative 11% reserve. So it's not to portray an unrealistic circumstance. This simply can't happen. Action will be needed and will be taken, undoubtedly, that will offset it. And so the opposite of that is on the next slide. And so if, as the board plans and takes action on tackling that structural deficit, well, then we go from 4% up to 6.7. The trajectory is just the opposite, and we build a stronger reserve in those out years. And so those are the line graphs. On the next page, that concludes the general fund. So those are the out years. We'll talk more about budget stabilization. Let's just take 1 minute, and I can move quickly through the other funds on the next page. As a reminder to the board, we maintain Fund 11, the Adult Education Fund, very small fund with about a $20,000 balance. Fund 12 is Child Development. That's over $1 million. It supports our preschool program. Cafeteria Fund supports all of the food services programs throughout the district, breakfast and lunch. And then There's Fund 17, that's our reserve, a special reserve fund. Fund 21, we're now saying that it supports Measure E, and that should read Measure E and Measure S. When Measure S funds are received, we're estimating in August, those dollars will be dropped into the Fund 21 building fund, and we'll talk about both Measure E and Measure S at the same time. And then Fund 25 is our capital facilities fund, where we collect developer fees for new construction in Duarte. That's where those dollars are deposited and utilized. Absent on this page is Fund 35, and Fund 35 was the county facilities fund. And the reason that it's absent is because we're planning on taking the dollars that this year are in there, roughly 2.2 million, and moving those dollars into the building fund where they belong, because this was a reimbursement from the state for previous construction projects in the district, and those belong in the building fund. And so Fund 35 is absent as we project into next year. It will have a zero balance, and it's not necessary to portray it. That's the summary on other funds. On the next slide, we get to next steps. We always conclude our budget presentations with what are the next steps? Well, there's that budget stabilization plan. That's really where the focus and major emphasis is. Continue to identify methods for reducing the structural deficit in the operating budget. You know, right-sizing students to facilities has been is another conversation that we've been having, and I know it's a priority of the board and a priority of the administration and superintendent to do that as we measure the number of students to our school facilities. That will be a focal point in the coming year. Revisiting major contracts, and this is always an ongoing business function, always looking at contracts for improving the prices, and we use transportation here as an example, but the myriad number of contracts the district has with outside entities, we are compelled to always look for the best quality and services at the best price. And so reviewing those contracts, and then lastly, and very significantly, collaborating with our partners, the teachers union and our classified union, for continued solutions to this budget stabilization plan. Those are the next steps. So I think on the next page, we call for questions. Any questions of the board? And we can go back to the next steps as a placeholder or a place to finish, but that really concludes the budget report. And we will ask you 2 weeks from now to approve the budget. Again, going into next year, it's a positive ending fund balance. That is a positive. We have a positive projected ending fund balance for next year. That gives us a year to plan and focus on those 2 out years. I will say, though, that because of the 2 out years being having the budget challenges that they do, we're certifying this budget not as positive, but as qualified. We're declaring it self-qualified to the county. They appreciate hearing that. We're acknowledging to them, we recognize the structural deficit, and we're going to do something about it, and through the budget stabilization plan.
Thank you, Mr. Bowler.
Okay.
At this point, board members, if you have any other question, Mrs. Koo?
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Jim, for all that information. I was wondering, do you have a plan or an idea of what the ESSER 3 is going to be applied to?
Well, yeah, good question. ESSER 3 is not fully earmarked. We're thinking that the dollars will be it's very preliminary when you consider it $6.5 million. That's a lot of money to put into a plan. And we have 3 years to spend it. So that's the beauty, I guess, of one-time money when you can use it over a 3-year period. Definitely for professional development for staff going forward, additional opportunities for our teachers and our administration, use of those dollars to assist the delivery of instruction, to students in classrooms. We'll utilize some of that money to assist our budget where we can. The restrictions on that money are they're the least amount of restrictions on that money of all of that one-time money with ESSER III. In other words, they'll allow us to take some existing positions that are funded by the district's general fund and pay for some of those salaries with the ESSER III funds in recognition of the impacts of this pandemic. So there are a number of areas, we'll look at all of them, from professional development to how those funds can ultimately meet the two goals: the goal of getting through the pandemic and giving additional instruction to our students where it's needed, to some of our staffing costs going forward over the next 3 years. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. More to come on that.
Any other questions, Cece?
I think you were so thorough. It seemed like I had more questions than you answered them as you were talking, but ESSER II, and she was doing ESSER III. ESSER II, you said was restricted or unrestricted? And
ESSER, yeah, though they're all considered restricted funds on the budget page. They're in the restricted column as opposed to the unrestricted column. But when we talk about restrictions in the sense of uses of those dollars, ESSER III is the least restrictive. They have more uses available than ESSER II and the ESSER I. Yeah.
And restricted would be like towards what? What would you say restricted would be towards? Where would that money go?
Yeah, as an example, you couldn't buy a textbook adoption as an example. So if the district had a textbook adoption it wanted to pay for out of ESSER I or ESSER II, that wasn't the purpose of those funds. And so that might be considered a restricted, don't spend these dollars on something like that. The strings loosen a bit with ESSER III, and so we're looking at all possibilities. Could we purchase textbooks with ESSER III money? We'd have to look a little closer. I wouldn't say no, but I can't definitively say yes. I mean, but it may be possible. More to come on that. Yeah.
Really interesting. But thank you for being so thorough on this. I mean, it was very clear what we were seeing and understandable. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still just, I guess for some reason, the decline enrollment part just really, I haven't shaken that. And one of the things I thought it would be really important, I'd like to know, like I saw on a number of 100, where did 100 kids go? Why did they leave Duarte Unified? Was it because of the methodology of the teaching? Parents didn't think they were getting the best education from us because we went to the distant learning, or they went to another school district. I just would like to know. That's a lot of students, and I just think, it would be the one thing that would certainly increase income if we knew 100 students could return back to our school district. But more importantly, I just would like to know if it's possible to find out the reasons why students are not here.
Absolutely, Mr. Bell. Yeah, I can give you one example that's an easy one to identify. We have smaller kinder classes coming into the district and larger classes in graduating. We have larger 12th grade classes, students exiting the district than students coming into the district. That's one reason. There may be a few others, but that's one. We're not receiving the same number of students coming in. And so we're seeing grade levels of incoming kinder in the 200 plus student range, where years ago we were seeing 300 plus kinder students coming in.
And, if there's a particular campus that maybe it's a little a larger amount, not going to that particular school. Again, I'm not looking for a major report, but I'm just very curious about it, because that was a startling number for me to see, and it had a big effect on the financial side of our school district. So anyway, it would be something I would like to see more information about. I appreciate it. The report was good. And again, as far as the work that you've done, and again, along with that and the budget information we had before. So thank you very much, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Bell, and thank you, Mr. Bowler. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Emerson?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I think that Mr. Bell is asking the right question and asking us to delve into this in a much more deep and kind of intensive way. I think Jim's example is a really clear example of what we're actually dealing with, because I think it's a little more nuanced than families leaving in droves. I don't think it's that, Mr. Bell. We actually, Ms. Hoffman in Student Services has done a fairly substantial amount of analysis to know how many kids are coming in, how many kids are leaving, what are the reasons or the conditions in many cases as to why families may be opting out. But when we really peel back the layers of this, if you have a high school graduating class of 200 students, but then you only bring in 180 new kinder students, you automatically have an imbalance.
Right.
You didn't lose a single student. You just graduated 200 kids, but because you didn't replenish those 200 kids at the front end, you now have an imbalance. And so it looks like you have declining enrollment. Well, you have declining enrollment because they never showed up in that example. So we're gonna unpack these numbers, but I want to go a little bit deeper on this, because what we're actually really talking about is systemic challenges that exist within the San Gabriel Valley. We're not immune. This is happening around us. This is happening not only in the San Gabriel Valley, this is happening across LA County. It's happening across the state of California. Declining enrollment is real, and it's impacting us in a really, really tangible way. There was a study that was done by the Public Policy Institute of California, where it actually showed from 2008 to 2018, LA County as a whole experienced declining enrollment at 9%. So that's the entire county was experiencing declining enrollment. You couple on top of that the San Gabriel Valley and the challenges of not a lot of expansion, because the San Gabriel Valley is fairly built out. You don't see tons of new home developments, so there isn't a place for a lot of expansion. You have very, very developed communities with lots of folks who have lived here for multiple generations, so not a lot of room for new families to come in, and the cost of living is extremely expensive. So that's a recipe for challenge. That's a recipe for challenge. So we're gonna delve into this. This is something that we talk a lot about as a team, because we're always looking for what are the solutions, what are the ways that we address this. There are things that we know, because we've been in conversation as a board and as a district about how do we get efficient, how do we right size. That can help. That can help with the challenges of declining enrollment. But the other piece that's important is remember that our budget is always a projection of what we think may happen. And because of the fact that we have a history of understanding that maybe there's going to be a decline of 100 students, we're trying to be proactive and budget for that. What we're hoping is that that's not what happens. And if that doesn't happen, then we can do an upward revision thereafter. So we will keep the board informed. We'll keep the board posted on this. This is going to be an ongoing bit of work for us as a team. So I just wanted to share that to give some additional context.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Emerson. And I think that we continue with presentations. So, yeah.
Yes, Madam President, and we want to just thank the board for an engaging conversation. I want to thank Mr. Bowler for his leadership and his work and preparing the budget with his team. It is no easy task. It is obviously a very, very complex process, and I appreciate the board recognizing the complexity of doing this work. So we're going to jump from one complex report to another very complex report given by our esteemed Assistant Superintendent of Education Services, Dr. Nadia Hillman, who will be presenting on our LCAP. Dr. Hillman.
Thank you. Good evening, board. Good evening, Madam President, the rest of the board, Dr. Amerson, and my colleagues in the community. Thank you. I'm here tonight to present the local control accountability plan that will be brought to you, that is here on the agenda for public hearing. And if I could go to the next slide to remind everybody about the process of what we refer to as LCAP. This is a yearly process, that this is a plan that we bring to the board that is locally developed, that accompanies our budget to provide an opportunity for local school districts like ours to share the stories of how and what and why programs and services are selected to meet our needs. And so this story of a school district is typically told in an LCAP update from the previous year. Well, if you remember, we had a very unusual year last year. So there wasn't an official LCAP brought to the board last June like we normally would. So actually this year you are being provided two updates, one from the 2019-20 school year, and also the update from the plan that we developed and approved in September of this year, which was in response to the school closure and the pandemic. It was called a Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. That was for 2020-21. So those are the two documents that are accompanying the LCAP plan. And then with the LCAP plan, we use metrics and stakeholder feedback to customize the plan. The whole idea is around our needs to meet the needs of Duarte. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we and Mr. Baller mentioned this just a little bit too when we talk about our local control funding formula, LCFF, and specifically when we start talking about the supplemental and concentration grants. They're developed around their three priority groups that the state has asked that generate sort of these supplemental and concentration grant funding, which we call S&C funding, and that unduplicated account that Mr. Baller referred to as 66.87%. And that comes from the percentages that you see here of these three priority groups. So 67.6% of our students in the state in Duarte are considered coming from low income families. That is derived by those who qualify for free or reduced lunch meal program. 22.7% of our students are English learners, and 0.8% of our students are foster youth. This, like I said, the unduplicated count is 66.87% coming into this year, which is generates this supplemental and concentration grant funding. I just was a note that actually has come down over the last couple of years. We were a couple of years ago, you may know that it was above 70%. So that there's a change maybe in the demographic. There's a change in our student population somewhat. So if we go to the next slide. Just talk about the process of developing the plan. So we analyze our data. When we use look at our updates, and you have these documents now, and the public has the documents to review over the next couple of weeks, because we'll be coming back in 2 weeks for your approval. But the data is used to analyze how we've done on what we've set out to do in the past. We engage and collaborate with our stakeholder groups. We take the entire budget, and this number is the number that Mr. Baller referred to. Our entire budget, which is for next year, is 49.5 million. And then we look at that supplemental and concentration funds, which this year will be $5,461,088, which is down really from previous years because that unduplicated count is going down. And what that means is that we are to make sure that we are increasing or improving services for our unduplicated pupils, which are our English learners, foster youth, and students from low income families by 19.31%. I'm going to go to the next slide, please. So the stakeholder engagement that I referred to before, we've talked with various groups over the over the last several months, including our Community Education Council, our DLAC, our district leadership team, our certificated bargaining units, our classified bargaining units, and we've surveyed and reached out with parents and our employees and our students, in fact, as well, through our Thought Exchange platform. And we also collaborate with our West San Gabriel Valley SELPA, which is represents our students with disabilities. Go to the next slide, please. So when we did the Thought Exchange, we asked the question, what are the most important priorities our district needs to think about in order to support all students over the next 3 years? Because this is sort of a 3-year plan. We're starting a new cycle of these plans. The Thought Exchange this year, we had 413 participants sharing over 400 thoughts with over 12,000 ratings. This is just a word cloud of some of the key ideas that popped up, and I'll show you on the next slide what the themes were. And the Thought Exchange themes came out, and we use those themes. We go through all the responses to see what the priorities of our stakeholders are. And student support was very high. Our instructional programs and strengthening those instructional programs. Health and safety was very high, and mental health and social emotional well-being, all really strong areas. Go to the next slide, please. So we have the whole document available for review for all the responses, but some of the key ideas that came up to the top, sort of the top comments that were given a high ratings and by all the stakeholders were about equity across the board for all school sites and understanding the unique challenges and barriers our students face. And the next comment you'll see there is about learning gaps, especially this year, it came up a lot. How will our district support students and parents, teachers and administrators to deal with all the learning gaps? And precisely, I think that I read most of the comments related to the pandemic and the school closures. A very strong comment here, the third one, if a student comes to our school not knowing English, what can we do to support them, especially during distance learning? And as you know from the LCAP, one of the priority areas is our English learners. The next comment there, socialization and behavior mental health professionals are imperative, especially after COVID. And then the last one I put on the screen here for you is as well as providing experiences that will increase our sense of community. And we need more district-wide activities for students, maybe some cross-age tutoring via Zoom. So these are the types of suggestions, the types of strong themes that we are able to generate through using Thought Exchange. Go to the next slide, please. So the document itself, the LCAP, is very lengthy, but I'm not going to go through the entire document for you, but I'm going to give you sort of an overview, sort of a summary view of what the goals that we've developed to focus on. So there's 4 goals. And I have them here listed for you. I'm going to go over each goal a little more in depth, but just to sort of show that we have some key ideas out of the first goal is really about closing that achievement gap. And what are we doing to make sure that we provide equitable access to teaching and learning that improves the outcomes for all students. And especially we look at those students who are probably our most vulnerable students, our students who are English learners, our foster youth, our homeless students, our students with disabilities, and our students with who are would be considered low income. Goal 2, we looked at taking all the themes and all the data about the physical and emotional security and safety of our campuses and establishing a school environment which fosters all of that safety and security and encourages our community involvement and promotes inclusive opportunities for student engagement. Our goal 3 is about diverse educational options that integrate core academic knowledge, technical skills, and relevant life experiences with the goal of really preparing our students for post-secondary education and career. And finally, goal 4 is about really, we want to make sure that we have the highly skilled staff and 21st century facilities that support all of these educational programs that we have for our students. So let me go in a little bit deeper on these goals to give you a little overview if you go to the next slide. So goal 1 was about that closing that achievement gap. And listed here, bulleted here, are some of the key actions that are related to goal 1 about the resources and staff and training that really help meet the needs of our at-risk students, contributing to class size reduction, knowing that smaller class sizes can help provide a more an environment that teachers can be real successful with students who have higher needs. Really all the supports that we provide for our English learners, our Title I programs at each of our schools that receive Title I funding, reading intervention, MTSS framework, which you're going to hear a lot about, that we want to continue working with, supporting and retaining our new teachers who come to us, and our continue our one-to-one Chromebook and hotspot program, and student success initiatives, including AVID. So go to the next slide. So the metrics for this particular goal of an achievement gap are looking at our graduate. These are metrics, by the way, from the California dashboard that is published every year. And we look at graduation rates, especially looking at our maybe more at-risk populations, our SBAC, English and math in the populations, as well as our English learner reclassification. Let me go to the next slide. And we'll talk a little bit about goal 2. And this is the goal that focuses on the physical and emotional security and safety of our campuses. And the initiatives and the actions that we take here are our continued focus with using PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports, our attendance initiatives. We know if students are connected to school, they're coming to school on a regular basis. Social emotional learning and mental health support, as you saw from our stakeholder engagement, are really going to be an important piece of this. Providing multiple opportunities for our parents and our families and the community to authentically engage with the schools. And then our after school program and enhanced campus security. Let's go to our next slide, please. So the metrics for goal 2, the safety, is the suspension rate. We want to make sure that this is a goal that we want to see that the suspension rate is going down. Students feel safe and are on campus, and the campus is conducive to learning. Our chronic absenteeism, that's another rate that we want to see going down. We want fewer students to be out. We want them to be in school. And then using our school connectedness and sense of safety from that we use through the California Healthy Kids Survey. Let's go to next slide for goal 3. So goal 3 is more about the diverse educational options that integrate all of the different components to make sure that our students are prepared for post-secondary education and careers. And the 2 areas that we want to focus on here are strengthening and expanding our multiple pathways at the high school, looking at what professional development and training that we can provide to improve quality and effectiveness of the high school options, and supporting continuing our CTE programs and the pathways options for our students. And then the other component is the expanding the instructional models for our grades 6 through 8 students, including professional development to improve the quality and effectiveness of those options. As you know, each of our academies in 6 through 8 provide some specific foci, arts or dual immersion, IB, and STEAM and coding and so forth, as well as the elective options. We have elective options that we provide at Duarte High School that we provided over the years, which really expand those options for students who may not have as many electives at a smaller campus. And let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about metrics. So we're preparing students for post-secondary. So the metrics that we're using here would be our college and career indicator, which is published this is all from the California School Dashboard, our career technical education completers, and our A through G completion, which means those are the credits that students need to complete in order to be eligible for admission to UC or a CSU. And let's go to the last goal. Next slide, which is goal 4. And this is, we talked about highly skilled staff and 21st century facilities, making sure that we're compensating and supporting a high quality certificated staff, as well as our learning centered leaders and administrative staff. And then we have highly trained and support our paraprofessionals and our classified staff, and all the basic expenditures. This goal really encompasses all of the sort of the base of what we are expected for all students, that we have basic services, that we have our maintenance and grounds and facilities, and that we have state approved, state adopted Common Core, I should say, state standards aligned textbooks and instructional materials. And the next slide is just the metrics. We use the facilities inspection tool. That's for our facilities, and our Williams settlement. That's our that you typically would see this at the board, where we would bring to you that we've satisfied all of those metrics on the Williams to ensure that we have the right teachers in the right places for our students, that we have textbooks for all of the students, that we have the right professionals that are working with our students with the right licensure and certification. And that is a very quick overview of the LCAP. Like I said, it's lengthy. It's a big document. You've got a lot of reading to do, but I will certainly want to entertain any questions or comments at this point, so that we can make any adjustments.
Do you have anything to add before we go to questions?
No comments to make. I'll let board engage with Dr. Hellman, and then if I have anything.
Thank you. Okay, board members.
Yes, Dr. Hellman, thank you very much for that presentation. I was wondering if you could maybe comment a little bit on the unduplicated students, I believe is what they were referred to as.
Mm-hmm.
So those that qualify for the free and reduced lunch program, you had mentioned that number has gone down for us. Is there some reasoning behind that? I mean, are there just less students from a disadvantaged background that are in Duarte now? I mean, do you have any, I guess, thoughts about why that's happening? And is it a trend across the state, or is it just Duarte?
I would say it's connected to what Dr. Amerson and the discussion from the last presentation was, that the cost of living in Duarte is changing, has gone up, and some of our families we don't have maybe young families that are coming in, and it's a very costly place. It's becoming a more costly place to live. That would be what I would say they would attribute to the decrease in the students who are qualified for free and reduced lunch, because you qualify based on income, the family reported income. So if you have families that are living in Duarte, in order to live here, you may need to, have a higher income to support the real estate or the rents of the homes here.
So, and how do we capture that information? I guess what I'm wondering is, are we missing out on people that maybe aren't fulfilling whatever paperwork that is associated with that, maybe due to the pandemic, or is that totally a separate thing?
That's important for us to always remind our families to fill out those applications. And it's something that we've been doing for years, because a lot of folks, we do this during registration, we do it during data confirmation, we do it when families register. It's a simple form. It does not even go through, it goes through the cafeteria service, and it's a sort of a very secure way of reporting, and that families, we really encourage families to fill out these applications. And so that's the kind of the way that we get this information. It used to be that we'd give a paper form out. You come through your registration, here's the form, fill it out. We still have that paper form available, but now we also do data confirmation that all our families, when they'll get a link in the middle of the summer, asking them to sort of review all the different documents. And one of the links in there is a link directly to that application as well. But we do we encourage families, we do outreach. It is a component of all of our sites do. To make sure that we capture, we want to make sure that we have folks who are filling out that application, so that they can not only qualify for a free and reduced lunch program, but it also helps them qualify for other benefits too that may be outside of the school district.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions for members?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I was just wondering, I thank you for laying out all of those goals and how we're going to measure it. I was just wondering that as the years progress, because you said that this was for 3 years, could it ever change within those 3 years if you see kind of a shift in things, or do you guys not usually like make a year and a half mid switch because you really want to keep the data consistent?
This is a yearly, we do a yearly update, and it's brought to the board. You'll see this again next year and kind of see where we are. We can make changes. That's really, it's entirely up to the community, to the district to make any changes. This has been, if the metrics tell us that we need to do something different, we can change the goal or we can change the action too. So there's different components to it. The goals are more broad in nature, and then the actions in there speak to how we're addressing them. Another component that's embedded in here, and this really happens with everything that we do, is we do program evaluation, right? So part of this is when we do update, we're looking, okay, well, is what we're doing working? Do we need to change course if we're not getting the outcomes that we need to? And of course, a lot of these types of goals take time. So, and we're sadly at a disadvantage this year because we don't have SBAC data this year from previous year. So we're sort of kind of missing a piece there. So it's part of our ongoing analysis, an ongoing looking at where we're going, and we have that ability as a district to make a change in how we want to approach over time.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question. I was just wondering, are like culture and climate surveys for like students and teachers and staff ever something that is used for metrics, or?
That's the California Healthy Kids Survey serves that purpose as a culture climate survey. That's the one that we have been using. And we've used that in the past. We didn't administer it this year just because we didn't have kids on campus.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
I just have one really quickly. When under student support, are the students, how quickly are the students identified that need certain, is it pretty quickly the process? Is it because it's through the teachers, or how does that work usually?
Well, it's okay. That's a question that I could probably talk about for a long time, but I won't. But it is the work that our professionals do on the natural. So students start the school year. They take teachers may make decisions about how they're going to assess where students are at. We have certain measures that we use, and where certain measures we're planning on implementing as a screener. That's part of what we're doing through MTSS right now. We're developing some assessments that we can have just to get a baseline where our students are at. We may use last year's data. A teacher may use previous years if we had SBAC data or something from the previous year, or if you were looking at English learner, you're going to want to look at how they're performing on the LPAC. So there's a host of ways that teachers and professionals in the school sites look at where their students are at and where they're going to make goals for those students. There's certain components that are automatically identified for them, such as if you're already identified with a disability, or you're identified with as an English learner. That's an area that we already know about, and we want to measure their goals from there, the growth from there. The idea is get in quickly and find out where they're at, and especially it's going to be really critical. And I'm not saying anything that I'm not saying anything that we already know, but this year particularly is seeing when they return, when all of our students return, where are they? What's the baseline, and where we can accelerate their learning from there.
Thank you again. It was, again, you're very thorough on what you presented out there. So thank you again for that.
Thank you, Cici. Dr. Hillman, do you have any idea how many different ethnicities that we have in the English learners, students in our district?
We have, You know what? I'm gonna give you that answer another time. And the reason
That's
why
fine.
I want to make sure I get it right, because you know what, you and I have actually had that conversation a couple of years ago, and I don't know that it hasn't changed. So I want to be, let me come back with that information if that's
And
okay.
the only reason that I'm asking you is because I think that the community, sometimes we portray that only Spanish kids are English learners. And I think that is very important for the community and for ourselves as the board members to know how many different languages are the ones that we are serving.
And thank you for asking that, because that's precisely why I didn't answer it directly, because I know that over the years it changed. There's nuances and it's been changing. And so I've provided this report. We have the data for you. It's not that difficult to get, but I want to make sure that it's accurate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if there is no more questions, and Dr. Emerson, do you have anything to add?
Just quickly, I'll just say that I want to again thank the team. These are heavy lifts. They are annual activities, but there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of moving parts to put these things together and put us in the right trajectory for the next school year. And so I just want to publicly just kind of thank Mr. Bowler and Dr. Hellman for putting these reports together, because it helps the board be able to consider really important information and then give us strategic direction for how we move forward into the next academic school year. So just wanted to thank them for their work.
Thank you. And item 11 is superintendent report. So
I could have just kept talking, huh? Well, just again, thank you to the members of the board and to the members of our team on a successful completion of an unprecedented school year. And so I've been really thinking deeply about kind of where we go next and what we do next. And there's a lot of work a lot of groundwork that's been laid. And so I have a lot of things that are on my mind, but let me start with this. I want to welcome Kim Guthrie, who this evening was appointed by the Board of Education as our new special education director. I think that is in a really critical position for our school district as we move forward. Our special education department was led by Jesus Ruiz, and Jesus did a wonderful job for us as a school district. And he did leave our school district. And at that time, we were a little bit taken aback because of the fact that we knew that there were critical things that we needed to do within special education, and we knew that the leadership of that department was going to be critical. And so we had the opportunity that presented itself to us that now we could not only go through finding and identifying new leadership for that department, but we also, as a separate process, we brought on School Services of California to do a comprehensive review and really kind of come to us and open up the hood and look into the engine and figure out what's good, what needs to be addressed, what needs to be completely revamped and rebooted. And we have a roadmap. And one of the things that I was very impressed by is that this evening when Ms. Guthrie had the opportunity to engage with the board, she was able to talk specifically about that report, which told me that she did her due diligence, she did some preparation, and she was prepared to hit the ground running when she joins us on July 1st. So I'm excited about her being a part of our school district, being a part of our leadership team. I want to celebrate just quickly all of our principals at all of our schools for doing a wonderful, fantastic job of concluding the school year by recognizing the hard work, the perseverance, and the grit of all of our scholars across this district. The end of year promotions, the graduations were impeccably done. And I think that we could be proud of our district and proud of our community for the sheer fact that we took a very challenging year and we gave kind of the best possible send-off for our students who went through this experience, giving them the opportunity to graduate, giving them the opportunity to be recognized during their promotions in person in a really smart, safe, and socially distanced way. I think that that's going to mean something for years to come for our families and for those graduates and for those promotees. So kudos to the board for your leadership in helping to create the conditions for us to be able to do that. And kudos to our leadership team for being able to put it into action and execute. I alluded to the School Services of California reports. I think that those are going to be guiding documents that are going to give us strategic direction and strategic vision as we move forward on our budget, but also on our special education program. And I'm looking forward to working closely with the board and with our leadership team to execute on the recommendations, execute on the strategic actions that emerge from those reports. And so I think our path forward is to be really, really thoughtful about what our community needs and what our scholars need and what they need. And you saw it on the slide during Dr. Hellman's presentation. They're going to need support. They're going to need to feel safe and secure. They're going to need us to be innovative and cutting edge and out of the box thinkers. And I know we have the right board and we have the right team to do that. And so although summer is for rest and relaxation, I encourage all of us to do that. You can be as so ambitious as to do it like Dr. Finley, and I won't disclose fully where he is enjoying his rest and relaxation. But what I will say is not only is summer an important time for rest and relaxation, it's also a key time for reflection and for growth. And so I'm going to be looking for strategic opportunities to help us as a governing board and team to talk about ways to be reflective and ways to grow together. And I'm also going to be challenging our district team as a whole on how do we not only rest and relax and rejuvenate for the year ahead, but also how do we become very, very reflective and growth oriented and have that growth mindset for the challenges that come ahead. So thank you so much for the opportunity to work with this community and to do this work. And we're looking forward to good things in the future. And that's the end of my report, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Emerson. We now move to item 12, request to address the board, and no requests were submitted. So we move to general functions, which item 13.1, approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 13. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Motion to approve.
Bell,
Second.
Mr. Finley. Any discussion? I will do a roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
Yes.
Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And Reina Diaz, yes. And we now move to item 13.2, approve the consent calendar. The next.
Move to approve.
Okay. Does anyone to remove any item for separate discussion or action? Okay, I hear none. Then Mr. Bell, you move to approve.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who second that motion?
Second, Cece.
And Mrs. Carroll. So, okay, I will call to, I will do a roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Cece Carroll.
Yes.
And Dr. Finley.
Yes.
And Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And yes, we have approved the consent calendar. And I see that Mr. Bell is, yes, he wants to do it our way. But that means that we approved the consent calendar because there were no objections. So we now move to personal student services. Item 14.1, MOU between DUSD and DUEA, dated May 19, 2021, expanded learning opportunities. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Bell. Second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Carroll. Any discussion or questions? No? Okay, since none, roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
Yes.
Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And yes. Okay, item 14.2, extension of itinerant teachers MOU between DUEA and DUAD for the 2021-22 school year. I need a motion to approve.
Motion.
Sorry.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Finley and second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll. Cici? She said yes? I can hear you that well, so. Dr. Finley?
He said yes.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Finley
Yes.
and Mrs. Koo?
Yes.
And yes, thank you. Item 14.3, declaration of need for fully qualified educators for the 2021-2022 school year. I need a motion.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second, Jackie.
Mrs. Jackie Koo. Any discussion?
Madam President.
Yes.
I would like to ask, this is a regular and routine item, but it elicits questions every year from members of the board. And so I just think it would be, I've had good conversations with members of the board about this particular item, but I'd like to ask Mr. Crosby just to come on, give a general overview of why we do the declaration of need and how it supports the district's work. Mr. Crosby.
Yes, we always want teachers that are fully credentialed and have all the right credentials. But sometimes we get times where teachers go out on maternity leave or leave of absences, and we have to bring in staff, and sometimes that staff might have not have a clear credential, but they're an intern ready, or they might not have fully completed their CLAD. And so these things of need in case we get those times, and we have to declare that before even the year starts. So there are times that we might need this, but this is only for just in case to put in a teacher if they're out, and make sure that we have the appropriate person. We always want the right person in a position, and that they are the fully credentialed as well.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Any other questions or discussion? I will do roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Cici Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
Yes.
Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And yes. Okay, item 14.4, calendar for the 21-22 school year. I need a motion to approve the calendar.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Carol, by Mrs. Carroll, and second by Mr. Bell. And any discussion?
Madam President.
Yes, sir.
No, never mind. They're already going to do it. I was.
Yes.
This question came up about academic calendar. Take it away, board members.
Cici, go ahead.
All right. I know. I just got a lot of parents that want to make sort of a suggestion, maybe to do this calendar and do it 2 years in a row versus just one. That was just one thing that came up. So so instead of this year, we're starting about this date. So next year, make it pretty much the same date. So vacation time for parents, it'll be easier to gauge or to put out there. So.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are working on that. We want to do 2 to 3 years out, just so that we can make sure our families and our staff to have plans too. So it's all the people concerned. Yes.
Well, thank you. Even better. Thanks.
I think Dr. Finley, did you have additional comments?
I just wanted to I guess second both Cici and Rick's comments. Yeah, I think it's important for not only families but for staff too, just to be able to make those plans. And I think it's a sign of respect both ways to be respectful of people's time off, right? I mean, if we can do that, I think it'll be a really positive move on all parts of the spectrum. And so I would highly encourage motion in that direction. And it sounds like we're moving in that direction. So thank you.
Who participate in putting the calendar together? And is that based the beginning and the end of the school year is based in how many days do they get during like spring break or for Thanksgiving week? How did that work?
So we have mandated days that have to be their holidays from the state, but we have a committee of CSEA, DUE, and management that work on the calendar and their calendar committee each year. Then it's brought to each association to move forward. But we try to look at past practice that we've done because the community also is looking at similar dates for the future as well to be off too. And we have to fulfill our 180 student days of teaching days as well. Our staff is on 185 days because we have 5 professional days throughout there as well. So we look at that, but a committee of classified, certificated, and management work on this together.
Thank you. And the parents that have contacted me they contact me not because the different days, but they were concerned what they got out of the school year so early and other schools continue going to school. You know, they thought we were teaching less days.
No,
other districts, so.
we teach the same amount of days. It was in DeWater Unified, it was about 6-7 years ago that wanting to finish the semester before winter break, which moved our calendar forward a bit because they felt people like Dr. Finley said, want to have vacation. If the semester ends after Christmas break, it becomes a lot of projects during the winter break or a lot of things happening during winter break, and they don't really get that break time. Also, they wanted to make sure that before AP testing, that everything was done because AP testing is always done at the certain time. Now, the other state testing is not. It's always based on how many days when you started school. So that can't have more days in there, but the AP testing for our high school students. So that was the reason why we moved our calendar to start more in the middle of August rather than traditionally when I went to school, you didn't start school till after Labor Day. But that is the reasoning why the calendar moved forward some. And then that's why we now end at the end of May rather than the middle of June. Those are decisions we're looking and discussions that we have in this calendar committee time.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. If there is no other questions, I will move to roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
Yes.
Mrs. Koo.
Yes.
And yes. We now move into business and finances. Item 15.1 is, excuse me, public hearing district budget for fiscal year 2021-2022, including a review of reserves and compliance with Education Code 42127A2B. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing for item 15.1?
Motion to approve or to
Second.
open?
Okay, moved by Mr. Finley, second by Mr. Bell. The public, I'm sorry. I will need a roll call. Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll? Thank you. Okay, Dr. Finley
Yes.
and Mrs. Koo
Yes.
and Diaz, yes. The public hearing is now open. However, we did not receive any requests to comment during this public hearing. Being that there are no comments, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion to close.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second by Dr. Finley. Roll call. Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Diaz, yes. Item 15.2, public hearing, Duarte Unified School District 2021-2023 Local Control and Accountability Plan, LCAP, for LCAP year 2021-2022. Did I have a motion to open the public hearing for item 15.2?
Motion to open.
Motion by Mrs. Carroll,
Second.
second by Mrs. Koo. Roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
and Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Diaz, yes. The public hearing is now open. However, we did not receive any requests to comment during this public hearing. Being that there are no comments, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Carroll. Roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Diaz, yes, myself. Item 15.3, Budget Stabilization Plan for 2022, 2023, and 2023-2024.
Move
May
to
I have a
approve.
motion, please?
Move to approve.
To approve, Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Carroll. If there is any discussion or question? I think we have a lot of information. Okay, roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Reina Diaz, yes. 15.4, Memorandum of Understanding with CSEA, Chapter 25, for use of the ABA6 in-person instructions grant funds. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Koo. Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Reina Diaz, yes. 15.5, approve memorandum of understanding with DUEA for the use of ABA6 in-person instructions grant fund. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bell. Second.
Second.
Second by Cece Carroll. There is any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Bell
Yes.
and Mrs. Carroll. Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Reina Diaz, yes. Item 15.6, approve use of ABA6 in-person instructions grant funds for all confidential and administrative staff stipends.
So moved.
I have a motion, Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Carroll. Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Mrs. Diaz, yes. Item 15.7, amendment number 1 to agreement for architectural services with Little Architects for the Duarte High School Sports Complex modernization and new gymnasium. May I have a motion?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Bell, second.
Second, James.
Second. Mr. Finley, Dr. Finley. Roll call, Mr. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll,
Yes.
Dr. Finley,
Yes.
Mrs. Koo,
Yes.
and Reina Diaz, yes. Item 15.8, resolution number 30-2021, authorizing the issuance of Duarte Unified School District, Los Angeles County, California, election of 2020 general obligation bonds, Series A, and actions related thereto. May I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Carroll. Roll call, Mr. Bell.
Madam President,
I'm sorry, yes. Any discussion?
with your permission,
We took about-
with your permission, at this time, the board is considering item 15.8. This is a resolution. This is related to us moving forward related to Measure S. And at this time, we have been joined by Mr. Tim Cardy and by Mr. Nick Ewer, our financial advisor, and also our bond counsel, who are here with us tonight to answer any questions that the board may have. You may not have any questions, but I did want to thank Mr. Cardy and Mr. Ewer for their work in preparing these documents. As the board knows, that we have been behind the scenes working very, very hard on moving Measure S forward, so that way we can do really meaningful work across the district. So just wanted to give the board any opportunity to engage with Tim and Nick on any questions that you may have on item 15.8 or 15.9. Back over to you, Madam President.
Thank you for bringing the first team in. I appreciate that,
Thank you, Dr. Amerson.
Superintendent.
Okay,
Thank you
ready
for the
time
first
for
team.
discussion, board members. So we're gonna be able to see him or?
I do
Yes,
see
I'm
Tim
here.
here. Yes.
Gordon,
Okay.
can everyone see me?
Okay.
Yes,
now-
we
Oh,
can
yes.
see you, Tim.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Madam President, with your permission, maybe I can just ask both Tim and Nick just to give us kind of general overview,
Please.
and just for the benefit of the board and the benefit of the community, what these documents are and what they allow us to do as we move forward. So, Tim, let's start with you, and then we'll have Nick follow.
Sure. No, and good evening, Madam President, members of the board. It's so nice to see everyone. I'm Tim Cardy from Piper Sandler, the district's longtime financial advisor. So we passed Measure S in November of 2020. So now we are getting ready to take the first draw. Nick will describe the documentation before you this evening, but the resolution that Nick has prepared for this first draw is for an amount of $30 million. So your board approving the documents tonight will be step one in the governmental approval process. Step two will be, we're scheduled on July 13th for the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors to approve its documentation, which will then put us in a position, hopefully, to raise the funds for the district right around September 1st. One of the other steps in the process, I'll be working with Gordon and Jim to talk with the credit rating analysts. As you'll remember from the refi, which we completed just a few months ago, the district has an outstanding credit rating from Standard & Poor's, an A rating. So I'm going to want to be working with Gordon and Jim to get that maintained. The bond market is extremely favorable. Interest rates continue to remain low. which will translate into a good value for local taxpayers. So we're on target for the first draw under Measure S, $30 million, and the district will net that less the transaction cost, so $29 million in change. But that's really the big picture. Nick, do you want to describe maybe a little bit the specific resolution that you've drafted and the accompanying documents or anything that you think is important there, Nick?
Sure. Thanks, Tim. And good evening, members of the board and Dr. Emerson. And again, my name is Nick Hewer from Stradling, Yucca, Carlson Roth, the district's bond counsel. And as has been described, the resolution would authorize the issuance and sale of the first series of bonds under Measure S in the amount not to exceed $30 million. And it also requests that the Board of Supervisors issue the bonds on the district's behalf, which Tim described as the second step of the process. And in addition to the basic terms and parameters that are set forth in the resolution also approves the two central financing documents. Number one, the purchase contract pursuant to which the bond underwriter will agree to purchase the district's bonds. And that document also sets forth the various conditions of the closing. And the other essential financing document is the preliminary official statement, which is the offering document that gets distributed to potential investors, and that will contain all the material information that an investor would want to know before purchasing bonds of the district. I'd be happy to answer any particular questions you have on the resolution. The second resolution is a tax levy resolution, which is the next item. And that accomplishes the simple task of requesting that the auditor controller levy a tax in anticipation of the bonds that are expected to be sold in August and closing late August, early September.
Right, and maybe I'll just add one comment to what Nick just said. So if you remember, when we put Measure S on the ballot, we targeted about a $50 per $100,000 tax rate. So that's what we'll be working with LA County to, within a couple cents here or there, to try to get that on the bill that will be mailed out in October for the next tax year. So that's that second document which Nick was describing.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
It's a great time to be issuing bonds. I mean, knock on wood for the next 2 or 3 months, but in spite of everything that's been going on in terms of the coronavirus and in terms of vaccination news and interest rates just have remained low. Investors have a lot of cash that they're looking to spend, and municipal bonds, such as bonds issued by Duarte Unified School District, are viewed as the most secure investments out there. School district general obligation bonds are viewed as very safe, very secure, highly desirable. So we're excited to work with the other members of the team and try to make this happen for you in the next couple of months.
A little sidebar, Tim, just looking at you and just thinking back, the last time we did this, do you know that we were able to use money from that bond years and years ago to fund some Wi-Fi for all our students and that didn't have it when all of this pandemic broke out? So, and it made me think about the things that you talked about and how we went forward to do it. And at that time, people were a little nervous and all that stuff, but I'm just saying, long ago, we made some decisions and it worked out for our community twice. Right. So thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. I've been privileged to be part of those different measures, and the community has definitely been very supportive and always responded favorably to the measures which you, the board, have placed before them. So we're excited. Remember, we had a great success with that refinancing. Remember that a few months ago?
Sir.
September, I think it was, of last year.
Yes, sir.
So we want to replicate that and deliver these new funds at the most favorable terms we can for the local community.
Appreciate you very much. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Carthy? If there's none, I do have one question. I don't know if you can answer that, Tim or Dr. Emerson, but there is always, in the past, there was always much money from the state. Is still that program available, or? Do we know?
Gordon, do
Tim,
you
you
want
wanna
to
address
answer
it?
that about state matching funds, I guess?
Yeah, so we have had access to state matching funds. And I think we actually, Mr. Ballard, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we still have some projects in the pipeline or in queue related to Measure E. Is that bond program or is that matching fund program still open, Jim, or has that been closed?
That's been closed.
Yeah, but we do have projects in the pipeline related to Measure E that are still.
Yes, we do. We do. Yes, you are right.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Mrs. Hu or Mrs. Carroll? Nope, not at this time, but okay. Then I will roll call.
Yes, Ken Bell, yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
And Dr. Finley.
Yes.
And Mrs. Hu.
Yes.
And Reina Diaz, yes. Okay. Item 15.9, resolution number 29-30-31, requesting Board of Supervisors of the County of Los Angeles to establish tax rate for bonds of the Duarte Unified School District expected to be sold during fiscal year 2021-2022 and authorizing necessary actions in connection therewith. So I need a motion to approve resolution.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Dr. Finley and second by Mr. Bell. Any discussion? Any questions? Then roll call. Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
And Dr. Finley.
Yes.
And Mrs. Hu.
Yes.
And Reina Diaz, yes. All yeses we have passed, we approve all these items tonight. And so that moves us to item number 16, non-agendized item by board members. So Mr. Bell.
Well, quickly, again, just think of really a great evening. Gordon, again, it was great to be able to go over some of the things we did about your evaluation, and as I expected, it was a very, very pleasant time to go through and to evaluate you. Thank you very much for your leadership, and I felt very, very good to know where we are as a board, and then to see as we move forward and going through even some of the figures and some of the things that Jim, what you brought through. I know it was not always pleasant to talk about the money and some of the deficits or what have you, but it's just a good feeling to see as we're moving forward. Rick, thank you for the things you brought tonight, knowing that we have some teachers and some instruction that's going to move forward. Nadia, again, you always bring up the educational piece and show us where we are as far as our young people and how some of the things that you have to let us know where our families are. So I just feel like I almost feel like we're back. And I just really appreciate everything you're doing. And Reina, thank you for your leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mrs. Carroll.
Yes, it's been a very busy last 2 weeks with graduations, promotions, scholarships, events, and just so many different things. But I wanted to just say that I'm so happy that I got to see, I'm so pleased with the high school, Mount Olive high school graduation. I have to do a shout out to the gentleman who played the trumpet at the high school. He did a beautiful job. I thought he was a professional just playing up there. I didn't get his name. I didn't look at the book, I forgot, but he was amazing. And all the different schools had very different ways in how they promoted the kids. And it was just wonderful to see. And I think Dr. Emerson said it best. I think we did get the best possible send off and that we could possibly do. And I think I'm just happy to see and be around to be around everyone now, social, and it's just wonderful to do that. I did have another, I did talked to, and we did an annual, I went to talk to Sophia Valdez, the coordinator to the preschool. We did, she was doing an annual preschool self-evaluation, and I got to sit with her, and she is just so, the preschool is just run well with Sophia. I mean, just, I can't say better things about how she has us, how she's been, you know, overseeing the preschools. And the annual preschool self-evaluation was like a parent assessment, parent involvement, environment, and action plan for the next school year. So I have to say nothing but great things about her. She is absolutely an asset to our district. And she, you know, spoke, you know, and also earlier we got to see Miss Martinez, who has done the murals for our schools, and she brought her Aunt Sophia, and she has done an incredible job with her artwork in our school district. So we're really are blessed to have her too. So, and that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm just, I think, like Ken mentioned, our evaluation. I think I'm very pleased. We have a strong board, and I think we have the vision, and I think we see Dr. Emerson being very innovative and bringing us to where we need to be. So I'm very pleased to, like Ken said too. So thank you, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Carroll. Dr. Finley?
Yes, Madam President, thank you for this time. I want to echo what was said. Also, this has been you know, quite the end to a very eventful year for DUSD and for the world in general. But it was so great to be at all of the promotions and to the graduations at MIT and DHS. It was my first. I mean, I haven't been to a high school graduation since 1999, other than the drive-through graduation we had last year. So it was yeah, it was so nice to be out there. And you know, the you know, when you look at the graduates as they cross the stage and they realize that is a culmination of 13 years of hard work and effort. And you know, you can almost see in their eyes as they get their diploma and they're walking off the stage. I mean, there's endless possibilities in front of them. And that is something that is extremely exciting, and it is invigorating for me. You know, even 21 years after my own graduation from high school, that's a contagious feeling. And as someone who is officially over the hill or at the top of the hill or whatever you want to call it, it signals to me that there's endless possibilities in front of all of us, and there's endless possibilities in front of our district. You know, we did some you know, looked at some sobering numbers this evening. But as we move through this, we have a plan. I mean, we have something we're not throwing up our hands and saying, gee, I don't know what we can do about this. We have a plan. We have the leadership in place to execute on those plans. We have a very exciting Measure S that is going to give us a lot of the resources that we need to execute on those plans. So as I look at our district in general, just lots of possibilities in front of us, and we as a board, we as a district, and we as a community have an opportunity now to really launch the school district into the future, and that's invigorating and that's exciting. So thank you for everyone's efforts in what they're doing to make that a possibility. It would not be possible without hard work and tireless efforts on everyone's behalf. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. Mrs. Koo?
Thank you. I want to echo a lot of things everyone else said. It was really exciting to be at the graduations, handing out those diplomas and getting to see some of my old students and being able to take a photo with them was amazing feeling. I'm also really glad tonight that we were able to use some of that ESSER money to help give that grant funds to the people who are working for our DUSD, you know, our staff, our teachers, CSEA. I'm really glad that, you know, we were able to do that for our employees, and it just shows how much we care for them. And I think it's really important with all the information that we've gotten today and on Monday, all that information. And I think it's important that as we move forward, that we reevaluate our priorities, right? It doesn't have to be set in stone. We can always rethink and re-innovate, just like Dr. Amerson said. One solution today doesn't have to be the same solution for tomorrow. And just, I think, you know, all our voices at the table, I think it's really valuable as we start looking at that budget stabilization plan and just to think thoughtfully. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Koo. I echo all of my board, my colleagues in the board, I like to say, especially to teachers and every single one who participate in every kid's learning year, school year, for helping them. It was not easy, especially during this year, but we did it, and we did it, and we did it well. And I like to extend a great and deep gratitude to all the organizations, especially in the community, especially those who put a lot of effort to bring money for scholarships to students. There were many students at high school who received over $2,000 in scholarships. For example, our own Ed Foundation. And from, I mentioned the Ed Foundation because they support, they work specifically for scholarships. But we do have a lot of community clubs that are doing the same thing. People that make from their own money doing it. So I am very grateful to be part of Tijuana, friends with Rotary, and also with Lois Gaston, that I know how hard they work to find the kids, to go over the kids, what do you call when the kids submit the application. They submit the application, but there are hours and hours for the organizations to go through every single one. And there are a lot of students. So I really thank you to all the people that are already retired from the district or retired. They are retired, but they have the time to give back to the kids. So with that, I will say thank you to all of you for tonight's meeting. I know it has been long, but I will share with you that 23 years ago, I came to closed meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We recessed for public meetings. And then we came back around 11 o'clock to the closed session again, going home sometimes by midnight. So when we see now that it's taking so long, it is tired. It's tired, but we are tireless because we know that it's with a purpose. We have a vision. Education is the one who drives the future. And so thank you, Dr. Amerson, for being the captain and our chief and help us. And once again, to all the persons who participate in tonight's meeting, thank you for your efforts. Mercedes, you know how much we appreciate all your efforts. And to the community, thank you for being with us. With that, Dr. Amerson.
So I thought I didn't have much to say, but I actually have a long list of things that I still want to talk a little bit about. I'm just teasing. I'm just joking. Starting to see the look on my team's face. They're like, no. All right. So, all right. So
did we do that Tuesday?
No, I do want to share something because one of the things that is always been a pride of mine for many, many years, having been at a number of commencements, and Dr. Finley was the one who sparked this thought in my head. When you have a chance to see graduates and you have that moment where you're able to hand them their diploma, looking at their eyes, you see so many different types of eyes.
Yeah.
You see the eyes of like exuberance, fear, uncertainty, exasperation. I mean, it's just, and here's the thing, this year, all you got to see were eyes because they had a mask on.
Yeah.
So all you got to see were their eyes. And I remember spending a little bit of time over at DHS during their senior decision day. And we had all the seniors there and we took this big group photo and we all had masks on. And I'm like, should I smile? You can't even tell if I'm smiling or not. And then they said, no, you can tell. You can smile with your eyes.
Yes.
And it's so true. And I just think that in these moments where we are being real people and we're coming together, let's think about the story that all of our eyes tell one another. Looking somebody in the eye, connecting with people, being authentic, being real, spending time, having conversations. It starts with connecting with people and looking them in the eye and seeing who they are. And so I want to leave everybody with that. And thank you, Dr. Finley, for bringing the commencement idea back up in my head, because that was one of my most, coveted moments, was being able to connect with a graduate by handing them a diploma and then looking in their eyes and seeing what was in store for them next.
Right.
And that's my mission for all of us, is what's in store for us next. The path is laid out and we can go in whatever direction we choose to go. And these 5 board members, this superintendent, and this team, we're going to put our oars in the water and we're going to row on the same cadence. Mr. Crosby, I know that rings true for you, because where we want to go, if we do it together as a team, we can go into uncharted waters and do something really great. And so I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to that work. And lastly, I just want to recognize Nuria Martinez. What a talented individual, and our ability to recognize her and Sophia, to connect with her and create these authentic experiences for our students. I was left with one word based on looking at her images just in that short video clip: inspired. And that's what art does. But even more than that, that's what education does. We're inspiring people by the actions that we take, by the programs that we design, and by the things that we do. And with that, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Emerson. We now move to adjournment. I was reading over here, closed session or general session for action. I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Bell, second.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Carroll. Any discussion or anything to add tonight? Ready to go home? Roll call, Mr. Bell.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Dr. Finley.
I'll say yes for him too.
Yes.
Mrs. Wu.
Yes.
And Reina Diaz, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a beautiful, beautiful, exciting, and professional board.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank to all of you, and for some of you, good morning.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Marcelo. Good night.
Good night,
Bye-bye.